So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as you all are checking in about how you're feeling. And I want to say, please feel free to turn on your camera if you'd like. And, you know, it's fine if you keep it off, but feel free to turn on your camera and join us. I've seen some of you already and you look really great. So how's my screen? Someone just want to let me know. Can you see my full screen?
Mm-hmm.
Bernandi, can you see my full screen?
It's too zoomed in a little.
It's zoomed, yep.
It's
Seeing
very
a lot of
zoomed.
your screen.
Yeah, I don't know why, Thea, but I'm having an issue sharing.
Can you try sharing your full screen rather than sharing that individual window, or vice versa?
Yeah, I did it before. Remember, we did the check together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you seeing it now?
That looks perfect.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, so everyone, good evening. Welcome to One Love Method Racial Justice Theater. I'm so happy to have all of you with us tonight. Like I said, you can feel free to, I'll be asking for your participation tonight. So definitely have something with you that you can write with. And also feel free to turn on your camera if you'd like. You know that HowlRound does record this, so you could potentially become famous. Okay, so let's just jump right in. I want to call our attention to Lowell Soyinka, Nobel Prize winner, just amazing playwright, director, producer from Nigeria. And Soyinka says, equally, it is necessary that art should expose, reflect, indeed magnify the decadent, rotten underbelly of a society that has lost its direction. This quote means so much to me. I read it again and again and again, and to a large extent, it has informed my work. Let's do a 2-minute free write, keeping that in mind, you know, that art, we have the power to use art to transform society, right? And to improve society. Let's do a 2-minute free write. So if you've ever done a free write before, it's pretty basic. I'm gonna time it. I'm also going to write with you, okay? And I'm going to give you the prompt, okay? With the 2-minute free write, really all that you wanna do is just let your mind be free. Don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about, you know, anyone reading it, because this is for you. I will not be collecting it, I promise. So yeah, this is just for you, and let your consciousness just flow, okay? So we'll do 2 minutes, and I'll let you know when that time will begin. And this is our prompt for writing. What is your racial justice ethos? In other words, what are your guiding beliefs and ideals on how to bring racial justice into the world, into the classroom? Okay, so this is the question. Let's go ahead and begin writing for 2 minutes. Let's begin now. Okay, everyone, why don't you finish up your thought? All right, so I'd love for us to start sharing our thoughts about this. If you could share some of the things that you wrote. Feel free to unmute your mic and just share with us.
Oh, sure.
Wonderful. Hello?
Oh, I didn't know if you called on me.
Yeah, yeah, just please unmute your mic and
I'm
share.
sorry.
Yeah,
I
go for
can't,
it, jump in there.
I won't be accused of being a computer whiz.
That's okay.
Here's what I wrote down. And people like me, being white, need to be, if I could read my handwriting, need to be exposed, learn, appreciate the contributions, concerns, problems, needs of those held down by racial injustice. We need textbooks, plays, books, forums to discuss, explain, and question, to learn, to grow, to understand. We need to realize the world will be stronger. I just mentioned that I was, my parents were very prejudiced against blacks, very, very. And I actually believed, I'm 77, I believed when I was a teenager that blacks were inferior, that they were, got lower IQ scores, everything like that. And as I started to mature and grow, I started to understand a little bit more, but it's come to my attention from friends that happen to be black that there really isn't anything or very much in what's being taught. And I was being told by some people that I've recently met of history of the blacks. I had no clue. So that's why I wanted to come to this learning process. So I've already taken up too much time, but that's what the point I wanted to make.
Thank you so much for offering that. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else, please feel free to unmute your mic.
So just for me, briefly, and thank you so much for this prompt. For me, briefly, how I would bring it into the classroom or just to colleagues and or people who I don't know, I would say is to do it maybe improv or play a game of walk a mile in my shoes in a sense. And what I mean by that is maybe do a prompt of like, okay, I have everyone pretty much lined up together. And then I would be giving them a directive to say, okay, take one step forward if you have ever been followed in a store or felt like you were ever followed or being watched when you went shopping. Take another step further if you have, so those are just some examples of maybe taking one step forward if these type of things have ever happened to you. And then the people who are kind of left behind, now the people who are in front will kind of look back to see who's left behind. And I've actually done this exercise before. And what happens is that for my colleagues who are Caucasian, who are, not Black, they can kind of now see visually like, okay, well, now I get a slight better understanding of what certain things that are racial looks like and sounds like, because some things they might not be aware of because of certain spaces that they're in. It's kind of like, oh, well, I've never understood where I don't see where, someone is clutching their bag in an elevator or if the person's close to them. But someone who's Black, you say it and they know exactly what it means and what it looks like. But so that's what I wanted to mention of trying to have someone visually and also seeing what it looks like to walk in their shoes just to get a better understanding. And I'm done speaking. And the reason
Thank you.
I'm done speaking is because
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone here is have maybe a hearing impairment. And when I'm on Clubhouse, we say that just so it's respectful for those who are hearing impaired. That also help with like a transcript as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And also feel free to type a summary of what you just said into the chat box as well. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, there is so much there. Thank you for that. Others, what was coming up for you when you were asked about your racial justice ethos?
If I can chime in, I think we have a categorical imperative to bring racial justice into the world, but we have an imperative as educators to foster multiculturalism in the classroom, because anything less is to reduce the amount of perspective that our students are able to have of a world perspective, of a multicultural perspective. And I think there are some people who would decry this movement on the bounds of altruistic principles, but there are people for whom the metrics of education can speak and move. And if by fostering multiculturalism, we present greater metrics, then academia can be the nurturing environment that brings about a generation of people for whom this idea of justice is just steeped. They came to college to learn justice as much as math, as much as anything else, and will win out because there will be more educated people leaving this environment, more open-minded people than people who are closed to it. And I'll be done talking now because I've prattled, but thank you.
No, great, yeah. I mean, I'm hearing just some really good things so far. Anyone else want to share? Thank you for offering that. Anyone else want to share?
I'm interested, what came up for me is how I've been complacent, how I've been patting myself on the back for the work I've done and being complacent. And the idea of anti-racist, proactively anti-racist, working against a tide as opposed to just calling out myself as an ally and then sitting back and saying, I feel great for being an ally. And looking at the construct of theater that I've always felt like the best theater was universal. So I could always look at my work and the work that I endeavored to do. The best version of it is that which reaches everyone, but that's not enough. It's simply not enough. It's you can aim for universality and it's still built on the shortcomings and the stereotypes that we have steeped, like was shared earlier. Thank you for sharing that. Encountering my own limitations is the only way I'm really going to feel like I am finding my own ethos, racial justice ethos, is when I really confront the fact that I'm limited. I was born in 1970, and I was steeped in an apathy at worst. But to me, that's like the real threshold that has to be overcome, is a sense of, we'll just feel good that I don't see color, that kind of sentiment, where that's not the point. It's, how do we find representation? How do we push back boldly against the stereotypes that have been there, cast courageously to make things completely switch? We have to let go of a bigger paradigm to solve this problem. Then I'm gonna do colorblind casting, or it has to be seen that so much was taught to us in insidious little ways, not just big, strange fruit ways where we're like, oh my God, that's so wrong. It's these insidious little ways that again, like Johnny, I'm talking too much now, but that's what came up for me, is really confronting my own bias and getting clear that I have to be proactive and I can't just be yay for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. This question for me is a very important question, just because it's like anything, right? If you want to do healthy eating, you're going to have a plan. If you want a certain degree, or you want to do something career-wise, you're going to have a plan. You have a certain perspective about it, right? For your wellness, right? There's a plan. Okay, you have objectives, goals, a plan. You have a certain perspective and philosophy on what makes you feel well. And racial justice work in the classroom and beyond is the same thing. There has to be an ethos. There has to be some guiding beliefs and ideals that we use that create the action, that create the steps that we take in order to create change. So I think it's always good to start off just by getting a feel for where you are. And like the last commenter, like, what's your paradigm, right? Because racism is so ingrained into our society, right? Like what lens are you using to look at the world? What lens are you using to create racial justice? Comments I'm hearing, like, you know, the needs of Black people, empathy building, that college is just as much for math as it is for justice, that we have to work actively to resist racism. These are all good things. When we talk about justice, like, what is racial justice? Go ahead and type your thoughts into the chat box. What is racial justice to you? What do you mean? What do we mean when we talk about racial justice? What does that mean to you? So we talk about racial justice. I have a quote here that I think really hits the spot for me. Can someone unmute their mic and read this text that we have for us, please?
Racial justice is the systematic fair treatment of people of all races, resulting in equitable opportunities and outcomes for all. Racial justice, or racial equity, goes beyond anti-racism. It is not just the absence of discrimination and inequities, but also the presence of deliberate systems and supports to achieve and sustain racial equity through proactive and preventative measures.
Thank you so much. So when we talk about racial justice, I'm like, okay, so first we need to be reflexive and think about where are we in terms of our racial justice philosophy, right? What is our racial justice perspective? And also to think very clearly about what is racial justice. We hear a lot lately. I'm hearing so much about, you know, I took Nicole Brewer's anti-racist theater. It was amazing. I really enjoyed it. And then I was like, you know, sort of putting my own spin on it and working in different ways within anti-racism and performance and theater, and also broadly just for thinking of pedagogy. And it was coming up so much. Well, you know, I don't want to, what does that mean to be anti-something? What does that mean, right? Oh, well, I mean, it clearly means something really important, right? To be anti-racism is to be, you know, actively against the racist system of discrimination that is directed against people of color on the belief in white supremacy, right? In the belief that whiteness is superior. So anti-racism is really important, but at the same time, we need to go to the next step. What's after being anti-racist? Okay, so I'm going to actively resist racism, right? But that, you know, has us working in many ways from, you know, being against something as opposed to being for something. So we have to think about, what are we for? You know, what are we advocating for? So this is what I'm bringing you to here, is this concept of racial justice, right? As a way to go beyond racism. And a way to act in ways where people who have been systematically oppressed have more equitable opportunities and outcomes in their lives. And we can talk more about anti-racism, right? Anti-racism, I think it's very important to be clear that anti-racism must resist white supremacy. It must resist white supremacy. One of our comments about anti-racism, you know, is that, you know, it's not enough to be against the tide, right? That we have to have, you know, this paradigm, right? I love that. Absolutely. I mean, if we think about it, ladies and gentlemen, really looking at history, right? The modern world was built upon white supremacy. And so if we are to be, you know, grounded in racial justice, we have to think about ourselves as doing work that resists white supremacy. So I'd like to use the chat box a little more as well. And I want us to write, to list in the chat box, what philosophies and or rhetoric do you know of? You can go ahead and list it in the chat box. What philosophies and or rhetoric do you know of? And this could be anything that you know learned in college, you know, that you know now. Go for it. Let's just go ahead and list any philosophies and or rhetoric that you know of, just like off the top of your head. All right, we have some good things coming in. Theory of the Global South, indigenization, transcendentalism. You all are, hello. Yeah, great. Ubuntu, wonderful. Post-colonialism, others. Let's keep it going. Yeah, go ahead and type into the chat box, like what philosophies and or rhetorics do you know of? We have some diversity already here into the chat box. Critical race theory, race identity development. So now I would like specifically for people to put into the chat box. Yes, great. Specifically, and some of you have shared this already, specifically to put into the chat box any non-Western philosophies and or rhetoric that you know of, or that you're in love with, right? We may know of a lot that you're in love with, that you really dig. Any non-Western philosophies and or rhetoric. Okay, just looking for comments. Slow down a lot. How about any African specific? Okay, so we have Ubuntu. Okay, let's go for African specific philosophies. African specific philosophies and or rhetoric. Just type it into the chat box. Okay, anyone else? Okay, a couple of the same people posting into the chat box. One of whom I know is from the continent of Africa. It's posted a few times now. Yeah, so if we just go ahead and just, take a look into the chat box, we have some that are African, non-Western specific. We have some that could be really from different places, right? When we talk about decolonialism, there are a lot of markers there, right? Normally, okay, great. Okay, so more is coming to Negritude. Yes, okay, Fanon. Okay, great. So normally if I put this out, I think we have a lot of wonderful, intellectuals here. That's great. Typically I'll put this question out to I'll put this question out to students. I'll even put this question out to faculty. And I'll even put this question out to you. I just put in the chat box. What do you know about the Benin Empire? What about the Oyo Empire? Does anyone know anything about those empires? What do you know about Ifa? Does anyone know anything about Ifa? Okay, so what I like to do sometimes is bring that question to students, right? Is to bring that question to students and even like, you know, staff. Very few people know about the city of Benin, which, you know, historically is known for like doing some amazing technology very early with iron, with terracotta, so with steel. So and they had like a city that was so huge with walls that were 40 to 50 feet tall. Like Europeans wrote about it like this is unbelievable. Like when they came to trade with them. I think that there's so much information about Africa that people just do not know. Like if I ask you what's Ifa or the Oyo Empire, which ruled for, you know, hundreds of years, most people do not have this knowledge. Even a lot of staff and faculty do not have this knowledge. People tend to have this knowledge maybe if they're from the continent or, you know, do research in that area or sought to study African American studies or African studies or African diaspora studies in particular, right? But don't necessarily have knowledge about that when they can call very easily, right? You know, ethos, pathos, logos, right? When they can call very easily Greek mythology. So I want to really point us to some important, in a very real sense, all people alive today are Africans, right? This is just the truth of it all, that we all have African ancestry. Africa is the most genetically diverse place, you know, literally like in the world, right, as a continent. And the modern world is based upon white supremacy. And one of the main components of white supremacy is that white people discovered everything, white people created everything, white people were innovators of everything, and everyone else was just along for the ride. I think that it's very important, and a couple of you spoke to this. You know, we spoke about the needs of people of color, and you spoke about, you know, empathy building, I think, and also like being anti-racist and switching the paradigm. All of that has to do with what we're going into now, because we have to really, in order to be a racial justice advocate, in order to promote and act racial justice in our classrooms, in our pedagogy, we have to switch the epistemology, because we have been working under a white supremacist epistemology, right? And what does epistemology tell us? What knowledge counts and what knowledge doesn't? And white supremacy epistemology has taught us that Black and brown people don't have a past, that we haven't created anything, that we didn't have kingdoms, that we haven't produced rhetoric, that we haven't produced philosophies, that we haven't produced theater method. But that's a lie, right? So one of the main foundations of the One Love method is using African philosophy and epistemology in the classroom. According to Dr. Karenga, he gets very deep into the Odu Ifa, right? From Yoruba land, from the Yoruba people. And the philosophy of the ancient Odu Ifa, right, is that humans are divinely chosen to bring good into the world. Human beings are divinely chosen to bring good into the world. So if you want to talk about my racial justice ethos, this is where my racial justice ethos comes from. And I've implemented it into my viewpoints work. and I've implemented it into my intimacy directing work. So I have incorporated it in multiple ways in the work that I was already doing, okay? Just ancient African philosophy, this Yoruban philosophy in particular. And so as we have this ancient city that dates back to 500 BC, but was in its golden age, right? 11 through 1100 to 1500, in its golden age, okay? And so if we think about that civilization and the things that it has left us, you know, in terms of oral tradition, in terms of performance, right, in terms of ritual, this is a major epistemological epistemological takeaway, and it's a really important philosophy that if you learn more about, you know, African performance, ritual, and theater method, even pre-colonial, you'll see how this Odu Ifa mentality really operates. So if we think about some principles, you know, there's so much out there in terms of African theater. One thing that I did myself was, when I started really wanting to know more about African indigenous theater, was to start researching African indigenous theater. What's problematic with that, right? It's like, you know, researching European theater, right? European traditional theater. There's just so much, right? And that, you know, just using that, just African alone feeds into the mentality, the white supremacist mentality that Africa is a country and that like Africa is not a continent, with so many different histories and so many different methods, right? And so many different philosophies. Of course, there's symmetry, but they're not the same. So I really focused in more with Nigerian theater and performance, and in particular wanted to focus on pre-colonial. There's a lot of stuff out there that's saying that there was no theater before contact with Europeans, and that is completely not true. That is completely not true. You can learn more yourself through, I have a resource list for you, but African theater, Soyinka, amazing. A history of theater in Africa. This is a great one. And I have a resource list for you. You can take a look at it as well, okay? So, so these are some of the principles that I'm finding in this work that I'm incorporating into the classroom. Orality, really, it's embedded in this idea of the crossroads of the sacred and the profane. So really using theater, using improv, using role playing to analyze that dichotomy and the tension between the sacred and the profane. Other ways to look at that, between the moral and the unethical, right? Or between the good and bad, so to speak. So a lot of ritual work and festivals, a lot of ritual work. And so a really important part of the work that I see in ancient or traditional, as you might call it, Nigerian theater, is a focus on the ritual. And it's something that you see that stayed alive in the contemporary theater, is the focus on the ritual. Right? And this is one of the ways, and you know, as a culture that, you know, did not always have its own indigenous writing system, this is one of the ways in which their cultures and the culture and customs and traditions and values, ethos stayed alive and well, right? And variety of festivals, so many festivals. It's very, very, very traditionally African and also Nigerian to have festivals and storytelling that is told through song and dance and by wearing masks and doing masquerades and also like using proverbs and idioms. You'll see, for example, Soyinka, who I opened with, I mean, he would write, you know, entire pieces just from one African proverb. This is really a principle of the pre-colonial work, is to take a proverb and do a festival performance around that. Take a proverb and do a circular performance around that, right? And so that seems to be really an important principle. And this idea, like we talk about it now, we talk about it in different ways, you know, ethnodrama, docudrama, we talk about it in different ways. But what also seems to be very prevalent in traditional Nigerian theater in particular are the historical narratives. Using performance to tell history, using performance to remind people of their history, seems like such an important principle of Nigerian theater and performance. And so I've had my students say, for example, use proverbs to create just one proverb to create a performance piece, right? To work on historical pieces. My students, we work with that a lot, like using the archive. And this is really important, especially to BIPOC students, right? Whose histories in many ways have been whitewashed. Again, because white supremacy has told us that that BIPOC people have not created anything, right? And have not been innovators. And that's clearly not the truth. And so doing this kind of work with BIPOC students has been really, you know, hearing their feedback is really great, because they're so used to only dealing with, you know, method that is coming from white scholars or white institutions, or Western scholars and institutions embedded in the same epistemology. I wanted to show Yoruba Alaranjo theater. I found it so interesting. This is a photograph that I found, what they were doing with mass theater. Again, this is pre-colonial. This in particular is coming from the Oyo Empire, present day Nigeria. So I really found this really fascinating. And then you know, if we talk about also like the use of costumes, right? In traditional African theater, using costumes as a visual reenactment, right? As a visual reenactment of people's history. And also a reminder of the cosmic relationship between the cosmos, relationship between people and their cosmic traditions. And in ways, performances in ways that really help people to experience transformations of time and space. And I just felt like that was really, really, really beautiful. And this idea of, you know, how, in terms of how this translates to current time, this idea of, you know, personal God as a muse. This is something that Soyinka has used many times, where he uses Ogun, the god of iron, hunting, and creativity, to drive his work as a director, right? And the people would always say, oh, he's so tough, he expects so much from his actors. You know, working and doing theater in Nigeria in the 1960s, guerrilla theater in the 1960s and 1970s. And so he would use that particular god, Ogun, as a way to inform his directorial practice, right? So I found that really fascinating. And also this idea that African drama, traditional African drama, should inform contemporary manifestations of media. So you find that, you know, a lot of scholars are taking a look at how, you know, Nollywood, right? Nollywood is really up to, depending on where you look, 2 or 3 in film distribution in the world. And they're creating a lot of films, and scholars are finding that there's so many traditional Nigerian theater methods, ritual methods, performance methods that have been used in Nigerian video film. And I really love this idea of the outside of the escapist air. You know, this is from Soyinka. He says, you know, because he would sometimes set up theater, like, you know, right after a court proceeding, right? Or right outside of a hospital, or right outside of a government office, right? And he'd have his actors ready to go. He'd also set it up in nightclubs. And when I was like, oh my gosh, you know, he's like, yes, make people be drinking, make the skit short and get people's honest reaction to it. He says there's something about the physical theater which makes it very easy just to feel like, oh, life is life, you know, just continue with the status quo, so to speak. Questions, thoughts about this? What's coming up for some of you? Feel free to unmute your mic. I'd love to hear some voices that we haven't heard from. And of course, you know, it's fine if someone else wants to speak again, that's fine too. Hi.
Hi, I'd just like to chime in. Just really, I really love this. Oh my goodness, this is just amazing. And
thank you, sister.
I'm-
Thank you.
I'm from the Caribbean, so some of this sounds very familiar to me with, like, in terms of like the folklore theater and pantomime and all of that. So this is really great. And you were asking for things that we have coming up. Well, this is something that actually passed, but I usually try to do this thing. It's called Plays in the Park. And I coined this phrase, it's called Broadway in your backyard, where I'll just have some actors just do pop-up skits dealing with different community issues. So that's one thing that I did back in August,
Wow.
where it was supposed to be actually in the park, but because of COVID, still went ahead and did the whole theater piece. But I did it in, I call it a secret location, where it was just myself and the actors while it was live streamed on camera and everything. And it went really, really well. So, and then people were able to come in with questions and just ask about the type of artistry and what we were addressing with the community conversation.
Love that. Love that. Yeah, yeah, and you're exactly right when you say that things. My background is Caribbean too. I'm Jamaican, born in the United States.
Yes, you're right here.
Yes. So yeah, absolutely. That makes so much sense. I mean, if we think of, like, you know, Caribbean, you know, the institution of slavery in the Caribbean, it was very different from the United States. And Black people in the Caribbean were able to hold on more to their indigenous African traditions as well. So we see more of the festival there, right? We see that. We see these ancient enactments still, you know, present in some of the culture. It's beautiful. Others, questions, comments, thoughts, what's coming up for you?
May I comment?
Sure.
I'm very curious about the architecture, and like I'm looking at the picture that's on the thing on the screen now, and like seeing the circles, and yet there's also some landscaping aspects to it where it seems a little bit more permanent, and I'm just curious to learn more if you know anything about the architecture of their performance spaces.
Yeah, I think you know, I think that's an excellent question, and I'm unfolding all of this too. I think that's an excellent question. You know, for me, with viewpoints, right, working within the 9 viewpoints, that's a really interesting question to me as well. And taking a look at, like, the contemporary Nigerian theater and learning as much as I can about the traditional and or ancient Nigerian theater, if you will, Yoruban theater, ritual and performance, I'm noticing that there's something really, really important about the circle. There's something really important about the circle. Reading about the traditional Nigerian theater, you know, often you have people who are presenting in the circle, and they would go ahead, you know, with their music and their mask and other ways, try to entice and engage the people who are sitting around them. And they would just be circled. And you can, even if you go on YouTube and, like, for example, type in the Alarinho, Yoruba Alarinho theater that I was telling you about. You could just see, you can find out more information about that. There's really something about using the circular as performance space. There's something about it that seems to be very inviting, and participation seems to be quite important for traditional performance. I hope that answers your question.
I just wanted to chime in. Thank you so much. My name is Ira, and I'm coming to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Tsawut, Waisanek, and Sawasan people, Salt Spring Island.
Welcome.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the focus of getting deeper than just teaching, I don't know, units on something, like having a unit on traditional theater from around the world and loading it into something a little deeper, something into the actual epistemology, because that's my jam to holding, like uplifting other epistemologies and worldviews in my classroom in ways that are both voiced and unvoiced, so that they're experiencing all of these different worldviews and experiences, not just as like topics of conversation and lessons, but actually baked into the curriculum. And all of what you're saying should really, I'm coming from Canada, all of this should really be baked into the curriculum itself. I feel, and this is just, it's just really beautiful, and I just appreciate this. So thank you. I'm done speaking.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for offering that. Yes. Others?
Can I just like I'm not sure if I'm able to give an input since I am just an intern,
No,
but
Bernandy, yes, you're our intern, and your input absolutely matters. What do you think, Bernandy?
I just feel like me as like a student's point of view, like learning about like the African culture, like learning about my culture from back then and seeing all of these seeing less lies and like having African friends. I think it's a good way to like merge the two by like knowing like the current, like, because my African friends, they do these traditions, so it's like it's good to like know about them and like where they came from, so that other people don't just say, oh, African people do this, like that's their traditional party, but for why do they do that? And I think that's like a great way to add that to the curriculum. Like you can make that relatable to the students. Like, have you ever seen a party like this? Like, why do they dress like this and why do they dress like that? And this is the reason why. And to go more into depth with that, because yeah, that's all I just wanted to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Bernandy, that makes so much sense. Just if we boil it down to not just, the theater work and the representation work, but like, yeah, and if we are in the business of representing people as theater folk, right, it's really important to try to learn about them.
Yeah, and it's also important to know like the history about Africa and like the modern, like the time right now in Africa. So I think that's also really important to bring that, and how far they came up, how far we came, and it's good to show that too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important to take a look at the traditional work and think about like what's happening now. And a lot of what we see, a lot of what, at least I can say, a lot of what I learned, commonsensically about the different cultures and countries within the continent of Africa, is typically after, is typically not pre-colonial, right? It's typically like, post-colonization, and that's really problematic because that says that life started for these people, like technology started for these people when they had engaged white Europeans, and that is absolutely false. That is not the case. It's just not the case. So I think that's really important to talk about pre-colonial, and not just Africa. Africa, yes, because that is the motherland of all human beings, but also other indigenous practices, before colonialism. I think it's really important to understand them as well. But I chose this. This is a part of my ethos, and I'm sharing it with you. So the second part of the One Love method, after like, okay, recognizing human beings are divinely, brought into the world to do good things. Every time I say that, I just get chills. I'm just like, talk about social justice theater, right? Talk about social justice theater and social change theater. So is being able to advocate for justice. So I'm going to call you to ask you, how can you advocate for other human beings? I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second, and I'm going to go ahead and give you, and Bernandi, do you have it as well? The link? I'm going to go ahead and put it into the chat box, everyone. So you can see, so this is just a resource, you can copy and paste. Some people have more success. It's open to the public, but some people have, well, anyone with the link it's open to. Some people have more success copying and pasting, or you can click the link, whatever works for you. Okay, and so on there, there are a few documents on there, but one of the documents I'd like you to go to is the racial advocacy table. Feel free to add roles. Sounds like some of you are faculty, professors, feel free to add roles, but I just want to put it out to you just from the work that you are doing, the work that you want to do. What are the ways in which your particular role and or roles can you promote racial justice? So I'd love for you to go into this document now and start filling in. I'm going to put that first one there. Go ahead into the document and start filling in. Let Bernandi's there if anyone has any questions or needs the link again. Are people accessing it okay?
Hi, I think you need to make the link shareable.
It is shareable. We checked it a few times. I would try copying, not going straight to the link, but yeah, sometimes Google Doc, because I've done this so many times already. Look at that. Anyone on the internet with this link can view.
Right, we can view, but we can't edit.
Hold on. Hold on. Editor, there we go. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I swear Google just likes to switch it up on you because I just used this in the workshop and everyone could edit on it. And I cleared it for this one. All right, so go ahead. Thank you so much. Go ahead. So that's done. Go ahead and you'll see there are 3 files there. There's One Love Method, which is a worksheet I'd like you all to have. There's a theater history syllabus, which you're welcome to look at and download. And there's a racial advocacy table. Wonderful, people are already getting started. So yeah, what can, in the role and roles that you're in, what can you do to promote racial justice? Okay, some great things are coming up already. Connecting with communities, creating safe and accessible places. And then, you can get even more specific, like, what does safe mean for some versus others, right? What do I mean by safe? Doing your research. I listed a couple of things. Listening, I feel like that should be all across, just really listening to the needs, listening to the questions. of people of color, of students of color, of actors. Doing research about characters. Yeah, I can write. I'm gonna add a little bit more because I really, as a director, I want to talk about diverse casting, right? Thank you everyone for joining here. Diverse casting. I'm also gonna say make Black heroes. That's really important. If you just focus on the slavery part of our history, if you just focus on the pain, you know, that is problematic. That it can be very traumatic. There is so much beauty and things that are celebratory in our history, and just making a character who's a hero, just giving it to a Black actor. Or a BIPOC actor, right? Just so that our characters and our kids, our people can also see themselves as heroes. We are in the business of representation, right? So there's so much here: play selection, produce work that you may think is commercially risky. So go ahead and keep with this, everyone. Thank you so much for working on this together. Go ahead and keep with that. I'm glad we were able to get that sharing situation done. So another thing that I want to ask you, and this is for your own notebook, okay? Black people, what are the ways you are/can advocate for your brothers and sisters? Black people, what are the ways you are or can advocate for your brothers and sisters? Again, this is in your own notebook. You can take a break from the Google Doc if you want to, just we're working on this together, and go ahead to your notebook so you have this for yourself. Please try and list 5 things. 5 things. Some of them can be from today, from what, you know, just sort of triggered your imagination, could be from your previous practice, but let's be intentional about the ways in which we advocate for our brothers and sisters. BIPOC people, that includes Black. I'm just like, yeah. And so, obviously, like, I knew that, but it's just really funny, like, looking at the slide, and I'm like, oh yeah. So, and I already gave Black people already have a question, but anyway, let's be inclusive, okay? So, BIPOC people, what are the ways you are/can advocate for other BIPOC people? Please, I'm asking you to make a list in your notebook. Make a list, please. And if you want to share that in the chat box, it's your list. It's up to you. Then please do so. White people, my white brothers and sisters, what are the ways you are/can advocate for the BIPOC community, for BIPOCs, people of Black, indigenous, people of color population? Please list at least 5 ways. Please list at least 5 ways. Part of this is just really getting us to be intentional about the racial justice work that we do. Good, so I hope you're working on that, listing 5 ways that you can be an advocate, depending on your, you know, I put this call out to everyone in the space. And feel free to use the worksheet. The Google Doc has a worksheet that asks the first question that I posed to you and other questions. So feel free, just a way to take the work that we're doing in this workshop and continue to use it. Lots of resources on that worksheet for different types of African performance and theater practice. Yes, does someone have a comment?
I do. I'm interested in being in the middle of Colorado and being in a impressively monochromatic state, in a monochromatic town, and just real practicalities as far as with this internet connectability that we have, I feel like I would love to hear ideas about taking something like an African proverb, and you have a group of white students, and we're eager to get them to immerse themselves in philosophies, histories, etc. It's all going to be internal, and that's good. As far as a lecture class, if they're learning about this, that's one level of the learning. But if I want to break them open in class and have them experientially working with a proverb, where does it become? And then a video of this goes online, and it's immediate cultural appropriation and embarrassing. I mean, there's a line here where I know that it is the best of intentions and it's the right intentions, but there's a reality that it can bump up against. That I want ideas.
Yeah.
How to jump into this pool and not feel like I'm asking them to do something that so many students now are hardwired against. They're like, I do not want to culturally appropriate. I don't want to be that kind of person.
Yeah.
It just
I think your question's clear. Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's a very important question. And I just want to be very clear about cultural appropriation. Okay. Cultural appropriation is not about using another culture's methodology, material, music, or anything else. It is about using that culture's material objects or cultural artifacts or what have you without giving credit to the culture. That is cultural appropriation. Okay, that is what is problematic. When I hear my Black students say, oh, it's fine, okay, she's wearing cornrows, that's not the problem. She's wearing cornrows and she's calling it boxer braids. That's the problem. They're not boxer braids, they're cornrows, and they've been a part of African, ancient Africans wore cornrows, kings and queens. It was a way to show like status and level of hierarchy. So the idea that cornrows can just be, relabeled into boxer braids, that's cultural appropriation. Bringing African epistemology to your class and helping them learn about the roots of this and the history of this, and then applying it to performance, whether it's autoethnography, whether it's a monologue or etc., that is not cultural appropriation to me. And I can only speak for myself.
Gotcha. Yeah. But I immediately want them to, as we all do, how does your story speak, right? How does your life, your experience speak? And these different ways of using myth and using a proverb to bring their own story to life is, it's a part of it. And it becomes immediately using something for their own story. And that seems to me right in the middle of that paradigm of it's that an entire people's stories were unable to be told. And I don't know, I'm just intrigued by that whole construct and how to dance through it with grace, and where I feel like as the colonizer, I am in this seat of how do I let go of that? How do I engender in them a sense of beauty, joy, love for the craft of it? And is it as simple as I am giving credit? If I'm teaching it, then I am giving credit to it. It's my own concern that a video of it is going to be shared on the internet, and it's that kind of wide, everyone being able to appraise it and see it, that I realize I have my concerns for being respectful and not putting them on the line.
Yeah. No, I mean, I hear you. We're gonna go into the next step, but I definitely hear you. I definitely hear you. I just want to make it clear that the colonizer has worked very hard to erase indigenous people's histories. So teaching indigenous people's histories and giving credit for indigenous people's histories is something that celebrates them and is something that resists white supremacy. And this is just a student perspective that I wanted to share with you. I never want to compromise my identity with white people. And it really, really, really spoke to me. And I think, I've heard this too from a lot of students privately. So I just want that to sit with you. Like, and just add to the importance of, using non-white and non-Western epistemology, and also just paying tribute to people's identities and histories. This is very important to our students, and it teaches white students that they have not created and done everything, and that other people in the world have and continue to contribute vastly. So I'm going to just wrap up with a couple of things that I wanted to share in terms of advocating for justice. You all had some amazing things that you put into the document. I can't wait to see more of it. One thing that I learned from the Zulu culture, it's very important, I'm giving credit to it. I am not a part of the Zulu culture. I'm giving credit to it, is just how they greet each other. And I always give credit to it when I use it, so people can know it's African philosophy and epistemology. And in Sawubona, they say, I see you. That means I see you. And Sikona means I am here. And so I really want everyone to just be thinking about One Love method and racial justice pedagogy as a way to say to our students, our BIPOC students, I see you. I see you in this world. And, and that you is not just the singular you, right? But we come from histories and peoples and ethnic backgrounds and cultures. So it says, I see you. So trying to incorporate or even centralize, like one of my classes now on performance and autoethnography and personal storytelling is just centralized in African indigenous epistemology. In particular, I'm working with Ifa, Odu Ifa, and so that's what I'm working with. Confirming environment. A part of doing that is being able to know your students' history and helping them to work with that history. And naming it. Again, I'm hearing your comments. That's another way that we can keep from appropriation. And when the videos go out, have students name it in the videos. Like, this is African, this is Nigerian. You will be in that moment resisting colonization that has tried to erase people's histories. So I just call you towards the end just to, go back. This is an ongoing practice, people, right? What is your racial justice ethos? This is developing, mine is still, even though it's firmly grounded in this Nigerian epistemology, this is always ongoing and developing. But if we can name it, we can be intentional about it. Listing 3 things that you noticed today that can help you with your daily racial justice work. What's your action plan? What is one thing? Go ahead and put it into the chat box. What is one thing? What's your first step right after this workshop? What's one thing that you can do right after this workshop? Or one thing that you plan on doing after the workshop? That could be in the morning or whatever. What's the first step after this workshop to bring about racial justice in your teaching and learning? Please share. Share what your thoughts are on this. For me, I'm going to investigate more about the Alarinjo theater, the Yoruba theater, with ancient African and pre-colonial roots. That's so fascinating. And the more that I'm learning about it is the more that I want to learn. And then I can think about ways to bring that to the classroom in a way that is respectful to the culture. So yeah, what's your action plan? I'm gonna stop sharing. What is your action plan? What's one thing that you can do right now, right after this workshop? Yeah, that's great. So Yinka, oh my gosh, I'm obsessed with him now. I'm obsessed with him now. Yeah, absolutely. Learn more about Cape Verdean and Haitian epistemologies. Yes. Yeah, learn about the Odu Ifa. Great, wonderful, everyone. Yeah, these are great. So I wanted to close. I wanted to share a poem with you and then lead you through a very brief self-care. I wanted to share a poem with you. This poem It's called Rooms of Murder. I wrote it. It's one of it's a favorite of my students when I share with my BIPOC students and my white students, when I share with all my students. So I'm not afraid of aliens. I'm afraid of those who shoot unarmed civilians in the back, of sergeants who shoot and kill a mentally ill and elderly woman in her room, in her home, of officers who gang rape a teenager and call it a hoax. I'm afraid of those who kill worshipers in a room of God, who murder teenagers because they're wearing a hoodie, who open fire at the movies and on first graders in a classroom. I'm afraid of unborn futures and that the America he protects is the one who makes me feel unsafe. Some people say all lives matter, and they do, but some people don't know I'm Black and afraid every time I see a cop, when I'm sipping coffee, when I'm walking from one class to the next, when I'm at the airport and security touches my crotch because my braids set off the alarm. Some people don't know there's a pain in my chest from just being. My fear runs from a long and steady river of white hate. Immigrants aren't the problem unless they become white. No, I didn't march this time in Boston or DC or anywhere else. I nodded when a friend said, I marched for you. Yes, march for me. Thank you. It's your turn. I'm going to keep writing and working and studying, because when your excitement about this cause dissipates, I still need to be better than you in order to survive. They ask me, how much more do I want? I want to walk into a store and not be followed. I want to walk on campus and not have white people give my hair dirty looks. I want a world where I don't fear for the lives of children I don't yet have. I want Black to be fucking normal, and for rooms of murder not to be painted white and called clean. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who's here. Join us today. There's never enough time. Thank you so much for being with us. And please, I just want to say, keep in touch. That resource list has my Instagram. I'm new to Instagram. So, you know, friend me on Instagram. I've been on Facebook for a while, but yeah, go ahead and keep in touch. If you could just do a little deep breathing with me. Let's get a nice inhale. Get some space. Exhale. Go ahead and close your eyes if you're in a safe space. Inhale. And exhale. On your next inhale, come up and then just hug yourself. Just land right on your shoulders. Hug yourself. Just thank yourself for being here today, for being present, for dealing with this difficult topic, for being interested in this topic. And just acknowledge that you are a light. You are a source of light in this world. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
I'm sorry, can you please share the Instagram information?
Yeah, sure. It's on. If you look at the One Love Method worksheet, there's a bunch of resources there. Like everywhere, every place that I got all of this information from, I just tried to share the knowledge on websites. So, but there you go. I'll repost it for you so that you can see. And it also has my next workshop coming up. It's more of a talk, but it's on Black intimacy directing. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you. I appreciate it. Love and light. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Take
You're
care,
welcome.
everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Take care.